Ladies and gentlemen, if you've ever wondered what it would look like if a stagecoach married a steam boiler and then decided to go joyriding through America's muddy backroads in 1903, allow me to introduce you to the Winton 20-horsepower rear entrance tonneau. It's got the seating of a parlour, the brasswork of a Victorian chandelier, and the suspension of a bouncy castle designed by engineers with back problems. And yes, you entered through the back because dignity climbs in last. Before we begin today's tale of gears, glory, and gas lamps, a heartfelt thanks to our wonderful sponsors, those charming YouTube subscribers who clicked join and now fund my caffeine intake and occasional panic purchases of early 1900s spark plugs. Thanks to you, I can keep making these videos without pawning my great-aunt's monocle collection or hosting Victorian cosplay weddings in the garage. Now, on to the main event, the Winton 20-horsepower rear entrance tonneau. Born in 1903 in Cleveland, Ohio, this brass-laden beauty was the pride of the Winton Motor Carriage Company, a firm founded in 1897 by Scottish-born engineer and endurance racing enthusiast Alexander Winton. At the time, America's automotive industry was more crowded than a hotel buffet line during a power outage, with over 100 car makers jostling for attention. Winton, however, wasn't just in the race, he was lapping the competition, thanks to engineering know-how and a flair for public spectacle. This was a man who'd already made national headlines by driving from Cleveland to New York, covering 47 hours of mud, broken wheels, and suspicious glances from horses. By 1904, the two-cylinder 20 horsepower was Winton's last hurrah before moving to 4- and 6-cylinder engines. It was a flagship vehicle meant to impress America's new class of motorized aristocrats. Wealthy families, think Vanderbilts, not the guy down the street who yells at squirrels, were snapping up these cars to replace their carriages. The 20 horsepower wasn't just transportation, it was a rolling declaration that you'd arrived, preferably in a cloud of steam, oil vapor, and envy. Production numbers were limited, partly because each car was painstakingly hand-assembled, and partly because Winton believed in quality over quantity. Fewer than 1,000 Wintons were built in 1904 across all models, and only a handful of 20-horsepower rear-entrance tonneaus are known to survive today. One of the best documented examples is chassis number 3T168, a car that was restored by none other than Winton's own great-grandson and returned from the United Kingdom after doing time in the London to Brighton Emancipation Run. That's like taking your century-old grandfather on a marathon and then giving him a spa day. Let's talk hardware. Underneath the carriage-like body, the Winton packed a horizontally opposed two-cylinder engine displacing roughly 260 cubic inches, about 4.3 liters, for those of us who buy milk in plastic jugs and not clay jars. This mid-mounted boxer engine was water-cooled, a serious luxury in a time when some cars still relied on hope and evaporation. It produced about 20 horsepower by the day's standards, though Winton cheekily claimed 22, because why not round up when there's no dyno test? The real party trick was the patented pneumatic governor system. Instead of a traditional throttle, the Winton used air pressure to regulate speed. The driver could bleed off pressure with a foot pedal to accelerate or release it to maintain speed. It was like mood control for the engine, confident, relaxed, and only mildly terrifying when climbing hills. Spark advance was manual, because you weren't just a driver, you were a mechanical DJ remixing explosions in real time. Power flowed to the rear wheels via a 2-speed sliding gear transmission of Winton's own design, complete with bronze clutches for each gear. Final drive was handled by a pair of beefy chains. Unlike Ford's planetary gears, this setup required both skill and nerve, and ideally, no sudden stops near ditches. Braking was via contracting bands, one on each rear wheel and another on the final drive sprocket, so plan your stops like a steamboat captain. The chassis was a serious piece of industrial art, channel section steel with a 94.5 inches, 240 centimeters, wheelbase. Suspension came courtesy of semi-elliptic front and full elliptic rear leaf springs, with trailing arms helping to keep things moderately upright. It rolled on wire-spoke wheels wrapped in pneumatic rubber tires from B.F. Goodrich because wooden wheels and bone-rattling vibrations were so 1899. At around 20,300 pounds, 1,040 kilograms, this 5-passenger barouche was no featherweight. But for all its mass, the 20 horsepower could reach 30 to 40 miles per hour on a good day, assuming no cows, mudslides, or angry farmers in the road. Fuel economy hovered around 10 miles per gallon, which was decent for the era, and besides, gasoline cost less than a haircut back then. If you could afford a Winton, you probably had someone else paying for the fuel and the haircut anyway. But the magic wasn't just in the specs, it was in the daring. This was the same basic chassis that in 1903 took Dr. Horatio Jackson and mechanic Sewell Crocker on the first ever transcontinental drive across the United States in a Winton twin. 63 days, no GPS, and more patches than my uncle's denim jacket, and they made it. That same legacy powered Winton's race cars too, like the legendary Bullet, which reached 55 miles per hour and then promptly exploded in front of Henry Ford. Legend has it, a furious Winton yelled, "I'll race you again!" And Ford replied, "Sure, once I invent seatbelts." This pioneering spirit wasn't just for the racetrack. Winton drove his cars to auto shows instead of shipping them, arriving mud-caked and smug. At the 1900 New York Auto Show, he parked his car on the stand with a sign bragging about shaving 9 hours off his cross-state record. It was marketing genius, mud as proof of performance. Heck, he even built one of the first car haulers in 1899, because sometimes innovation looks like putting a car on another car. The Winton 20 horsepower rear entrance tonneau was as much a statement piece as a machine. With its sweeping lines, brass embellishments and rear entry layout, it wasn't just a car, it was a Victorian porch on wheels. The tonneau body, detachable for conversion into a 2-seater, allowed high society passengers to climb aboard from the rear like they were boarding a yacht. After all, nothing says opulence like climbing into a car backwards with a parasol and zero suspension travel. The design combined elegance and function in a way only early 1900s engineering dared. Its pyramid-pattern rubber mats, brass pressure gauges, and buttoned leather seats weren't just aesthetic choices. They were era-appropriate status symbols. The instrument cluster had just enough information to keep you from exploding and just little enough to keep things exciting. The 1904 Winton 20 horsepower rear entrance tonneau isn't just a car. It's a rolling piece of American legend, a brass-bound reminder of a time when men were bold, roads were optional, and wearing goggles made you a hero. It stands at the intersection of endurance, elegance, and eccentricity, proof that early engineers weren't just inventing transportation, they were dreaming it into existence. From its transcontinental conquests to its speed record pursuits, the Winton embodied a spirit of innovation wrapped in leather and laced with kerosene. It wasn't perfect, it rattled, smoked, and had all the subtlety of a marching band in a cathedral, but it worked. And over a century later, it still works, still rolls, and still commands respect in a world that has mostly forgotten how hard it once was to move forward. And now, the moment your wallet's been dreading, the prices. When new, the Winton 20 horsepower retailed for a princely $2,500, that's about $90,000 today. And collectors have taken notice. In 2021, R.M. Sotheby's sold a fully restored example for $198,000. Another similar model fetched $172,000 in 2007. In 2025, estimates for the next one range from $175,000 to $225,000, depending on originality, history, and whether or not it still smells like 1904 tobacco and ambition. So next time you see a brass-era motor car chugging past at 25 miles per hour, don't laugh. Salute. You're witnessing the ancestor of every road trip, every dashboard gadget, and every traffic jam in history. And finally, dear viewer, if this ride back through time tickled your curiosity, click that subscribe button before I have to sell more reproduction carbide lamps just to keep the lights on. May your roads be smooth, your spark timing accurate, and your crank handle always engage on the first try.